talking about cybersecurity. It was pretty neat. We could just see Claire there for a while, and then all of a sudden you just appeared. You're like those those hackers that get in your system.
I skate around all over the place wearing many hats. You have to fall in, fall out. So like anything. And true, technical issues come up, and I was set, laptop ready, preview there. All of a sudden, power shut. The power cord comes and a whole host. So I'll transfer over. But here we are. This is an exciting time, though. I mean, we're moving to a whole new realm, and these are important times. So tell us what you are motivated by, excited by, David, and what keeps you up at night in terms of those kind of things, and your role as the Japanese consulate.
So yeah, I hope we could have more of a conversation than a presentation, right? I've run for public office 3 times. I can tell anybody how to lose a race, and so you can wind me up and tell me I got 3 minutes or 30 minutes or 3 days, and I'll just keep talking. But with this number of attendees, I'd love to have more of a conversation, right? So good morning, greetings from the North Carolina Consular Corps. Just so you all know, so I'm the Honorary Consul for Japan here in North Carolina. I also chair the Corps. So that is the 24 heads of diplomatic missions that are here in North Carolina. These are compulsive networkers, right? These people are just, they do what they do because they like to shake hands. COVID has messed up their protocols, but if you go to nconsul.org, you'll find a listing of all these people here in North Carolina, and please make use of that resource, right? On behalf of that organization, on behalf of the Consular Corps College that I'm also a chancellor of, greetings. I'm excited to be here. It was fun to do the first program a couple years ago. And, I really enjoyed, so there was a color guard the first time. You had some students there. It was great that the students were there. Nothing makes me happier. But so I'm going to tell you a little bit. So as an attorney, I do a lot with both foreign direct investment into the United States, and then also helping US companies export their products abroad. So at some point in time, I'm going to pivot and I'm going to talk a little bit about export controls. I'm going to talk a little bit about being safe in complying with US laws. But first, I'm going to parrot back to you to some extent a presentation we all received not so long ago as a diplomatic corps. And there's some interesting statistics, some facts and figures that you guys there's some good takeaways. A lot of it is, is going to be stuff that if you don't know by now, you need to be under a different rock, because a lot of, if you had trouble filling up your car with gas over the last week, you know exactly why we're here and what we're talking about. So I'll tell you this kind of the global view of the cybersecurity environment. There is, and I know we're not, we're dealing more in this audience with sort of small and mid-sized businesses, and honestly, you are a growing segment of the targeted category of victims for cybersecurity, cyber crimes. Financial, still 20, I'll reel off some percentages real quick. So, who's a target? Financial institutions, still 23%. But that's a more sophisticated, that's a harder target to hit. And you saw actually with the Colonial ransomware situation, that even the criminals appear to have been surprised at the target they ultimately chose, and it spooked them too, right? They shut down the East Coast of the United States and only got $5 million out of it, right? They didn't plan that carefully, and evidently they issued a press release saying they're disbanding. Now that means next week they'll have a new name. They're not going away. But increase, those targets are hard to hit. Financial, energy, utilities, 4%, high-tech telecom, 12%, transportation, logistics, 4%, healthcare, government, all single digits, same with education and entertainment and the media. And here are the growing categories that are now double digit and bigger. So retail and hospitality, 12% and growing as part of the, a piece of the pie. And business and professional services seem to be easy targets for, or at least perceived to be easy targets for cyber criminals. We had a case a couple years ago, tragic for the careers of several individuals. We had a Japanese company that was operating here in Carolinas. Someone got into the system and had been monitoring the personal correspondence, the proclivities, the calendar of the president of the company for some time. So when it came time that he was on the road and he emailed his CFO, look, we've been looking at these companies for a little while. We have this incredible opportunity. I'm on site right now. I need you to wire $350,000 to this particular account so we can finish this transaction. Of course, the president of the company knew nothing of that, right? He had gotten spoofed by some criminal. The CFO did not do what a CFO should do, which is pick up the phone and call the president. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay. I see there's just, all right, as long as my mic's okay. CFO should have picked up the phone and called the president and say, hey, is this you? Is this legit? Failed to do so. $350,000 vaporized in a second. The president's no longer with the company. The CFO is no longer with the company, and it probably set back their development efforts in North Carolina and the United States, a good 2 years. So very, I know Sumio Shibata and John. I spoke with John Loyak yesterday. Shibata-san. By the way, that I mentioned the Consular Corps. The state of North Carolina, pretty much any state, I talk to companies that want to go global, and they should, absolutely, it's their tax dollars at work. They should be making use of the foreign offices that their state hosts individuals at. So Sumio Shibata in North Carolina, Japan office, he's been there, I don't know, since the Middle Ages. And is an incredible resource, and you don't have to pay for that kind of resource. So I wanted to throw that was a good sort of interjection. So who's detecting breaches nowadays, right? Used to be internal detections, and there's kind of a matrix between in-house detections and outside detections. You will see increasingly over the last couple of years an inability of companies to detect nefarious actors in their systems internally. And you're seeing a dramatic outsourcing, about 10 percentage points a year since 2017 in terms of their outsourcing that just because companies can't seem to keep up with the sophistication. So here's a scary statistic. How long, and these are not necessarily small companies, these are more mid-sized companies, but how long is an attacker in the system before being detected? And here's the averages. So dwell time, it's calculated as the number of days an attacker is present in a victim network before they're detected. So we've got 2019 figures. All dwell time measurements improved in 2019, with incidents being discovered a little bit quicker. Went from 50 days to 30 days, but 30 days is a long time. And even more scary than that, 12% of investigations turned up dwell times greater than 700 days. So that's just shy of 2 years that people are in your system before detection, at least in 12% of the cases. So who are these people, right? You've got espionage as a factor. You've got hacktivists that have ideological bents. You've got terrorists, obviously, and you've got financial. And most of these folks, at least that we need to be worried about as a group here, are going to be the cyber criminals. These are people that want to come in, they want a quick score, and they want to hop out. So the presentation that we received was really insightful because it was before, obviously, the pipeline ransomware case. But it was, she was highlighting that cyber criminals, historically had targeted personal and credit card information. But our system, it's a checks and balances, right? They come up with a way to hack, we come up with a way to protect, and back and forth and back and forth. But they're increasingly turning to the ransomware. And, I don't need to, I'm sure you all are familiar, ransomware is essentially, 100 years ago, it would be somebody comes in and changes the lock on your file cabinet, and won't give you the new combination or the new key until you pay them off. And so, that's what we saw. I honestly can't believe that a company as large as Colonial with FBI resources paid the ransom, but I suspect, $5 million to them is a rounding error. So they probably thought they got off cheaply, but wow. Hate for that to become a, you always sort of hate to set that precedent. What should you do to protect yourself if you're in, individuals in this environment? What should you do to protect yourself? And again, a lot of this is common knowledge. Don't trust emails that ask for personal information. Increasingly, so anybody, been to the doctor's office lately and all of a sudden they care about your birthday? That wasn't a thing 5 years ago, but now, my birthday, and of course they have to scroll quite a ways down that chart to get to 65, but it's a, increasingly important piece of information. So, these are obviously most likely scams. Never respond to emails, online messages. The thing that seems to trip up my kids a lot is, everybody wants to take these tests online now. What's your love quotient? What's your personality factor? What is your, what you say blue is your favorite color? No, we can help you find your true favorite color, right? These are all, individuals who are gleaning information about you. It may be for a nefarious purpose. Probably it's just for a marketing purpose. But the more information you put out there, the worse. Of course, don't trust any messages, for transferring funds. That's a common scam. I've often thought, and, I know this is being recorded, so I probably shouldn't say this, but I've often thought that there should be an English language tutorial for cyber criminals. Have you ever noticed how poor the English language is? It's just Bank of America doesn't misspell words. Wells Fargo knows, how to put a comma in a sentence. It's just, I don't know who falls for this, but, I think we're all busy people, and that's probably a major contributor. Lotteries, prizes, real problem, on a personal level, loaning out phones and computers. The kids are, I have a college student that just graduated. They do it all the time. They swap out phones with each other. Big problem. I'll talk about why that's a real problem for businesses in just a second. Again, online social media quizzes, generally just a really bad idea. I know a lot of small businesses that get their security software set up when they purchase their laptop, and then they never think about it again. And I have a very close relative who, I don't know how many updates had been in the queue that, just never bothered to, think that was important. Obviously Wi-Fi, wireless, passwords. Again, if ransomware is a big deal, figure out a way to back up your information so that you don't you don't get shut down. Rethink what's important to put on a cloud and what's not. Be really careful about what you carry around with you on a laptop. Delete apps. Wow. My wife does a Women in Tech podcast, and we had a cyber. She had a woman on talking about the biggest problems and the best cures, right? these apps that people load onto their phones and never use. Be judicious. At least once a quarter, people need to get on their phones and say, you know what, have I used the Clubhouse app? Have I used, any number of these apps that are tracking exactly where I am and what I'm doing? On an iPhone, even if you turn off the locating functionality of your phone, the Apple software, once you turn it back on, they'll try to recreate where you went. Now they may not know, if you turn it off, they may not know that you stood at the Harris Teeter staring at the Haagen-Dazs for, longer than normal, right? Like they would otherwise be able to do. But, they will try to recreate that. And that's just the way that the software works. Obviously banking, shopping online, look for the S, right? Look for your HTTPS, back up your information, store it safely. Really, sort of basic fundamental, what you would do if you met somebody on the street, right? Online, nothing, no different, right? You wouldn't be, flashing that wad of cash on the street corner. Why would you do it, online? So let me talk about businesses, because that's really more what I do. And fundamentally, I want to talk to you. A lot of our clients, a lot of people in the Triangle, certainly a lot of companies in North Carolina, work with a higher level of technology. And a lot of that technology is protected for various reasons, right? It may be trade secrets, it may be, sensitive information to the company, or it may be something that the U.S. government deems to be important for national security concerns. It may be controlled, and there are various controls, right? There's countries that we say, hey, we don't want you to do business with them, right? And it may be, in any given year, it might be Cuba, it might be South Sudan, Iran, North Korea, folks like that. But in addition to that, you've got controls so you've got the high level stuff, right? Think guns and grenades and, really sensitive information on a laptop. And that's going to be controlled by the Department of State. That's under something called ITAR, the International Trafficking in Arms Regulations. And that's if you got ITAR information, you probably know it. The other level, sort of lower level of control, though, is the U.S. Department of Commerce controls things under the EAR, the Export Administration Regulations. And let me tell you about what an export is, because we deal with foreign communities here all the time. If I am, if somebody down the hall from me is an Iranian citizen, and doesn't matter that, he's been here 5 years, doesn't matter that he's attended every Trump rally he could get to, doesn't matter how loyal an employee he is. If I give him down the hall here in Raleigh, North Carolina, some information that the U.S. government says should be controlled for some reason or any reason, I have exported that product. Right? You can have a deemed export, which is it doesn't even have to leave the United States. So when we're dealing with foreign workforces, we got to be very careful about how we sequester information and who we give it to. There's a ton of employers, especially in Research Triangle Park, that the badging system is so critically important, right? Because you can actually violate a U.S. export law and never have the product or the information leave the United States. And so I think that's an important takeaway for most companies. And the second is, we're about to start traveling again. And I couldn't be more excited about this. I've done a little bit of traveling during COVID, but tomorrow night, I'm heading down to Jacksonville. We're having a corporate retreat. Normally I would go, oh man, that's a rotten way to spend a Saturday. But honestly, after COVID, I'm kind of sort of looking forward to it. We may actually shake hands. So let's, jury's still out, right? Folks in Florida don't really care. That I don't think many of them, care so much about COVID. But I'm excited about that to the extent we start traveling again. I know most companies, especially companies that have controlled information or rely a lot on intellectual property controls. They've got know-how, the Coke secret sauce, the syrup, right? Any of that information, they don't let their employees leave with laptops. They do not let them take their computers. They do not, in many cases, let them take their phones overseas either. Again, that's an export, and that puts your technology, that puts your company's information at risk. Be very careful. Very few companies have a policy, and it's increasingly important that you do. Now, this doesn't apply to all companies, right? In some cases, just fine, absolutely just fine for your folks to, your salespeople to travel around. You don't have anything necessarily, they don't have access to anything that would be damaging to your company. But in many cases, even for the salespeople that might have sensitive pricing information, they might have customer lists. Be really careful about what you allow people to take on an airplane, even domestically with them. Increasingly, we are seeing companies write policies that restrict the ability of individuals to move technology around the country or around the globe with them. It would be, I know I may have gone a few minutes over, and I apologize for that, but if we've got, if people have questions, I don't know if we really have time for that. I've been to 56 countries. I had to count recently for the State Department. So I've seen a lot of what's going on in different parts of the world. Again, albeit with a 14-month hiatus, right? I haven't left the country since February of last year. But if somebody has specific questions about sort of best practices, or if anybody else has some suggestions as well about sort of best practices moving forward. I haven't touched on things like VPNs and I think that common information like that. But if anybody has questions or other comments, I'd rather this be a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, your comments, you're right on point. We do have some international studies, and that many are and have faced the challenges you identified. Of different.
I'm afraid I can't hear.
I couldn't hear that either.
I think what we're asking for is there any website or any resource of space that if people want to protect their businesses, where would they go? I've been reading a lot about cybersecurity, and definitely you want to hire a lawyer if you get into trouble. So it's best to have business insurance at all times to cover litigation. But what is your recommendation for businesses today?
So it varies by business, but I would wager that most people when they got their general liability insurance, when they got their, generally it's going to be under your general liability. There's going to be a rider for computer crimes. Different companies call it different things, right? In general, that's going to be inadequate. Right. And you're going to be surprised at how cheap it is when they give you that policy rider. Right. It's going to be like $80, $90, something like that. But they're going to give you maybe $5,000 worth of coverage, per incident. And that's it, again. So some companies may be perfectly adequate. Right. If you're in the goldfish sale business, and you're not selling piranhas, that might be just fine. But if your business involves PII, right, personally identifiable information, if your business involves taking credit cards, if you have anywhere in your system children's birthdays, and I'm mentioning the things that are the most problematic, right? You're going to need a whole lot more than that. The general, and if you're doing business in a number of states. So the important takeaway, and this is a great question. The important takeaway is that cyber crimes and data privacy are currently regulated primarily on a state-by-state basis. So if you have a data breach, right? If you're in the surfboard rental business and you have a ton of credit cards in your system and somebody hacks that, right? You have now an obligation to let people know, and you have some very time-specific hoops you need to jump through. Those hoops vary by state. So the more states you do business in, the more it gets really expensive really fast. And most companies, and I'm talking sort of mid-sized companies here that have a lot of people's credit cards, if you get hacked and that information gets out, you are probably going to spend 6 figures in the first month just on professional fees and contacting the right authorities in the right states. Now, if you're just doing business in one state and you don't have a whole lot of information that's problematic, you don't need that level of worry, right? But again, if you are, say, doing internet sales and your website is robust and you're getting a lot of people's information through that, and somehow for some reason you feel a need to store that credit card information or it gets out in public, you're gonna be up in a 6-figure legal bill really fast, and you need to have insurance that's commensurate with that risk. So great question. But again, it's business by business, right? It's some people don't have to worry about it. And I don't want to scare those people, but if you do have that information, you know, a data breach gets really expensive really fast.
In an obvious condition of banking, are there protocols such as if you do have a customer base overseas, products coming to America and distributed from an American distributor, what are the legal barriers with the distributor in America, and how should they represent themselves? I guess that comes down to the liability.
Yeah. So great question. If anybody wants to, you know, really get a sense, and it's a really quick sense as to what it's like to sell products that are regulated around the world, I think the website is called vitamins.com. And you'll see that they'll have a product and you'll have to click on a flag, and by country, it will tell you, you know, in certain cases, you can purchase this, but we're not going to guarantee it will actually make it to you. There are so many different hoops to jump through that that's a great website. I direct folks there and just, you know, have a look at how complicated this can actually be. For your question, for bringing products into the United States, so just note that, you know, if you're the importer of record, you know, you are in charge, you are tasked with paying the tariffs, which for anybody importing from China, you know, you have to recall that there's, you know, one level of tariffs that applies to the world. And then you've got what I guess are still colloquially we refer to as the Trump tariffs on those imports from China. Be cognizant of that. Also be cognizant of the fact that, you know, there are a number of products, again, especially those coming from China, that are hit with additional duties. And a duty is, you know, a tariff, a duty is just a tax, right? So this is an additional tax that has to be paid when you bring it in. And there are anti-dumping and countervailing duties that also attach to a lot of products, right? It could be anything from cabinetry to various chemicals to, you know, household items. And if you do not do your research and you bring in a product and your profit margin is 10% and you didn't calculate the 349% anti-dumping duty, right, you're going to have a really bad day in your business. So be really careful on the tariff side. And on the regulatory side, which was your question, again, in the same way that if I have a North Carolina company that's exporting overseas, I want that distributor to be 100% responsible for compliance, right? Product labeling, you know, don't sell to Quebec unless it's in French. No, you know, you better be monitoring for knockoffs in the marketplace. You know, I'm going to have a distribution agreement that's crafted to put that burden on the foreign distributor in the same way that, you know, if you're importing product, you're pretty much on the hook, right? So if you don't make sure that your PPE masks, right, are compliant, and we saw this huge problem with folks, you know, getting all caught up in the hoopla and the hype and the fear of COVID and making some really poor business decisions, trying to bring in, you know, personal protective equipment. Just note that you're responsible, right? If you bring in something that's FDA regulated, that's not FDA approved, it's on you. But then again, you know, we have a transparent system. You know, this is a great country to do business in, right? We make fun of our federal government all the time, right? But honestly, the transparency here, it's horrible that the CARES Act is how many hundreds, thousands of pages, right? But at least it's all there for the people willing to read it. The question about U.S. vulnerability. So what is really interesting to me, so I also work in an area of the law called CFIUS. I know it sounds like a disease, right? But it's the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. And this is the entity that reviews transactions. So it's under the Department of Treasury, and they review transactions based on national security. And it is really interesting to me to see how national security, that definition has expanded of late. Right? It used to be guns and grenades, but now it's expanded to infrastructure. And I think it's so critical. We had a CFIUS case that involved water treatment facilities, right? That's critical infrastructure now. There is a law now where the Treasury Department, if you're a foreign national and you buy property that is too close, you know, within a particular radius to, say, a military base, they have to review that transaction. All good, all long overdue. So the definition of infrastructure is you know, developing, it's evolving. And I saw yesterday Senator Tillis and a couple other senators, bipartisan legislation. They're going to throw in yet another $500 million at the national stockpile, right? We saw huge problems with the fact that we source 80% of our medical equipment and pharmaceuticals from China, right? As a result of COVID, all of a sudden everybody went, you know what, that's a problem. We need to reshore. And so as business opportunities go, you know, my answer to the question is, yeah, we've got some vulnerabilities. Absolutely, we have some vulnerabilities, but the business, you know, every challenge is an opportunity. A big opportunity is that the United States is about to see one of the greatest, I think, reshoring initiatives. Now, of course, we're like, you know, we're like that dog that's like squirrel, right? So our focus as Americans, you know, only lasts a couple of years, but I think we're about to see an incredible reshoring opportunity. So, you know, any of you that wants to start a needle factory, any of you that, you know, really wants to, I've got a call later today with some folks that have a treatment for sulfur mustard gas, right? Haven't heard about that really since World War I, but you know what? It's still a thing. ISIS used it not so long ago. And let's put all that in our national stockpile. Plus, you know, I don't know if you guys have been following exactly how much money has been flooded into the U.S. economy. And there are no shortage of government agencies that are they're still trying to figure out how to get their heads wrapped around how they're going to spend that money. You know, we haven't even spent the first tranche, right? And we're now on the third. So good opportunities there. Yeah, so hold on, let me look it up real quick. This is a great site.
The list of legal organizations that we turn to regard
So I couldn't hear the question, but before that, I wanted to look up a website, and I'm going to give it to you here real quick. There's a good question about it was Code of Federal Regulations, but even better than that, I can give you a website. So CISA, C-I-S-A, is a government organization that no one knew existed. No one knew existed until March of last year. So you'll recall in a number of states, businesses were shut down unless you were critical, right? Depends on how the state defined it, right? Pennsylvania had a list. Boom. These businesses are, these businesses aren't. North Carolina, it was more of a, if you are in, say, agriculture, or you support agriculture, or you are in various, agricultural distribution, we tried to define it a little more broadly, but every state and a lot of municipalities tried to define what was critical. And a lot of them relied on a little known, but very important government agency called the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, C-I-S-A. If you just, so there is a National Infrastructure Coordinating Center under CISA. I invite you, even if you're just curious about the state of affairs and what we think is critical now in this country, you will enjoy going through CISA. There's an Unmanned Aircraft Systems Division. There's an Office for Bombing Prevention. There is critical infrastructure. If you look at the critical infrastructure sectors, you'll see what is deemed to be critical, and really sort of what are the vulnerabilities, right? You got chemicals, communications, dams, energy, critical manufacturing, food and agriculture, transportation, water and wastewater. It's a slightly scary but fantastic read, and it is an agency, again, that I don't know that anybody paid a lot of attention to until COVID. So COVID again, real challenge for some people, but a real opportunity for this country in particular to reinvent a set of priorities that focuses on prevention, right? Let's not wait till the dam fails. So CISA, CISA.gov. I don't know that I've missed anybody. Darkest Diaries. Okay. Okay. I'm so sorry. Cannot hear.
Sorry, David, we are running overtime, but thank you. We always love having you, and it's just such an honor. You're just a wealth of information, and I will want to call you back, and I know how busy you are, but stay as long as you can, and we'll have to move to the next speaker. So my next speaker for today is Ken Peters. And Ken, running a little, is Susie out here? I see Ellen is here. So she's not here. All right, so Ken, I'm going to put you up next. Ken?
Hey, I'm here.
Yeah, I gotta change the setting. Okay.
Okay, all right, I'm here.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
be right with you.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much, David, for your contribution and the time. We really appreciate what you allowed us to share today. And it's now time for our next speaker, Mr. Ken Peters, Dr. Ken Peters. He's a professor and also an economist. And he's done business all over the world, South America, South Asia, Africa, parts of Asia, and associations with NASDAQ. Dr. Peters will share with us. He's written a book, The Cure, and in which he parallels to some extent similarities to the COVID vaccine. But we're delighted to have Dr. Peters. Dr. Peters, come share with us, if you don't mind.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It's a bit hard for me to go into a lot of stuff because David covered so much about what I was going to speak about, the idea of the impact of the economic impact of cybersecurity and what it is doing to our world. One of the things that he touched on that I would say to all of you that what he was talking about safety, and I would just tell all of you that one thing that's really critical, if you're in an airport, if you're anywhere, if you're at a salon and they have guest internet, do not use guest internet. You're basically leaving your system open for anyone that's sitting near you to get in there. So he didn't mention that. I mentioned a hell of a lot of stuff. My specialty actually as an international economist is, if you read me online, one of the things it says is Dr. Peters has a robust understanding. I can't remember who wrote that for me. A robust understanding of regulatory affairs. So the issue of